All right, welcome everybody. My name is Peter Sherwin. I am the new president of Sons of the Revolution here in the state of New York and our Fraunces Tavern Museum. And let me just say, I couldn't be prouder. This is a great organization. It's wonderful. We just had a board of managers meeting, and the engagement of our society is something very special. But what's even more special is that everybody here has turned out for our Tallmadge Day meeting and event, and people online, and it'll be available on YouTube afterwards as well. You know, as you know, Sons of the Revolution was initiated in 1876 by grandchildren of those who fought in the War of Independence and those who also risked their lives for being accused as traitors to the English through their civil positions as well. And we, for the last 150 years, have been working to perpetuate their memory and recognize their service. As part of that, that's what we have here for Tallmadge Day. In a little bit, I'm going to tell you about Mr. Tallmadge and why we are here on Tallmadge Day for his meeting. But first, we need to start this off correctly, and we're going to have an invocation. Our chaplain, Father Christopher Cullen, is not able to join us in person, so our past president, Ambrose Richardson, will lead us there. Ambrose?
Please stand. Let us pray. Almighty God, your psalmist writes, "Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain." We ask you to bless us in our commemoration this evening. We are grateful for the life and service of Frederick Samuel Tallmadge, whose generosity allowed the Sons of the Revolution to acquire Fraunces Tavern in 1904. Fill us with a spirit of gratitude as we contemplate your providence in the life of this republic. Lord of history, we ask you to sustain this republic, to bless its president and all its officers, especially its watchmen, the members of the armed services who stand guard throughout the world. We ask all this in your sacred name. Amen.
Amen. And our registrar, Scott Jeffrey, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And the flag is behind you. Well, there's a flag in front of you, but let's do the one in behind.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I want to recognize a few people who are here. I'll note Owen Cloder, who is our first vice president and chair of the executive committee, Justin Tessier, who's our secretary, Mark Kapinski, our treasurer, Paul Dietrich, our third vice president, and more importantly, almost chair of our book award committee. You've met Scott Jeffrey, our registrar, and we have various board meeting members with us. There's Alan Borst, Steve Madison, Russell Moore, Brandon Sokol, and Craig Weaver. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. We've got as well some additional important people, and Ambrose, I wasn't going to forget them. Our immediate past president, Peter Hine. Peter, please stand up. Everybody knows you, but they want to see you. Our former immediate past president, Ambrose Richardson. And if we go back further, but I think he's our permanent immediate past president, Bob McKay. Yes, excellent. And we have some other distinguished guests. You're all very distinguished, but I'll call out a couple. We've got Shervin Hawley, who's vice president of the General Society of the Sons of the Revolution for the First Region. Bethany Davis, who's second vice regent for the Knickerbocker chapter of DAR. I thought I saw Bethany earlier. Oh, okay. And Catherine Jackson, Hi, Catherine, who's Vice Regent for the Fort Greene chapter, DAR. And I don't see Melinda Allison. She was going to be here, but she, I think, is the Registrar for Children of the Revolution. Staff-wise, we've got our Executive Director, Scott Dwyer. Wave to everybody, Scott. Shelby Newhouser, you saw her around. She's our membership manager. Melissa Lauer, education. Where's Melissa? Melissa was just up here turning on the web part, education and public programs. There she is. Hey, Melissa. Sophia Hall greeted you as you came in. She's development and events coordinator. And Armini Wilkins helped you with beverages and comestibles. So we thank them for all of their work. Oh, and there's Shelby. Hi, Shelby. An announcement. Somebody's got a birthday coming up. It's George Washington. And we're throwing a ball. And I hope you all come and celebrate with us. We're going to be at the Metropolitan Club on Friday, February 21. Tickets are available on our website. If you want to be in the ball program, it's not too late. Please let us know immediately, though. And it is a great event. I know a number of you have been there, but it's a lot of fun, and really hope you can make it. If you come, there's a special free, because it's included in your ticket, 2 p.m. Tour of the Fraunces Tavern Museum here, Saturday at 2 p.m. And on Sunday, we're going to have our church service. That'll be at Church of the Incarnation, Sunday at 11 a.m. And then there's a lunch afterwards. And of course, we recognize George Washington's birthday then, but we also recognize those of our members whom we lost in the last year. But now, I teased you a little bit earlier about Tallmadge. I wanted you to hear all of these things, and now I'll tell you a little bit about him. Frederick Samuel Tallmadge was the grandson of George Washington's spy master, Benjamin Tallmadge. And he is one of, or was one of, the 13 original founders and incorporators of Sons of the Revolution. And of course, it all started here. And then afterwards, there's the DC chapter, and then the General Society was created. But it all started here, and he was one of the 13 original. He was also our second president, and he served in that capacity for 20 years, from 1884 until his death in 1904. But as you heard in Ambrose's invocation, we also recognize him for essentially buying us Fraunces Tavern. At the time, while he was still alive, in the late 1800s, the Sons were trying to acquire Fraunces Tavern. And finally, in 1904, the owners agreed to sell to us, and Frederick Samuel Tallmadge's last official act as president of the Sons was to sign the contract. He unfortunately died not that long afterwards, but his love for the Sons was such that he left us his townhouse at Gramercy or on Washington Square, either one, and his sister allowed us to sell it. And with those funds, we closed on the purchase of Fraunces Tavern. And after renovation and restoration, we reopened on the anniversary of George Washington's farewell, which of course took place here in Fraunces Tavern. And we reopened on December 4, 1907. And it's been our headquarters ever since, and we're so proud of that. And that's why we commemorate him. His birthday is January 24. So I at least brought in a glass. Anybody else who did, please join me in a toast to Frederick Samuel Tallmadge. Happy 201st birthday. So now we've got a couple new members. And do I still have that right, Mr. Cloder? You do. All right. Owen Cloder is going to come up as chair of our membership committee, and Scott Jeffrey is going to come up as our registrar and make a presentation.
Not sure whether we speak into the Kiwanis microphone or the podcast microphone here, but we'll figure it out. These are the rosettes. Could we have both Joseph DeMona and George Dunstan, please? Come on up and join us here. We have had about 65 new members over the last 4 years, and tonight is no exception. We have 2 more. Since you're standing close to me, George, I'll introduce you first. George Dunstan is the Chief Privacy Officer for Barnes & Noble, and his patriot ancestor was Private Joshua Converse, who fought at the Battle of Lexington and Concord, which of course pretty much started the whole thing. So thank you and welcome.
If you allow me, I will attempt to do this. It's always tricky.
George was proposed by our members, Alexander Pappas, and seconded by Russell Moore, who's here tonight.
Thank you for that. Hold on. Oh, there we go.
You have to practice this a little bit.
A little bit more. Sometimes
All right.
they're easy.
You can stay on up here. Joe, come on over. And our second new member tonight is Joseph DeMona. He is a former entertainment lawyer with the recording companies, and his patriot ancestor is Private David Manson, also a historically significant soldier, as he crossed the Delaware with George Washington on Christmas Eve, 1776. And Joe now lives in Hastings on Hudson. He was sponsored by me and also Carl Raymond. Welcome, Joe, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Scott.
Awesome. Glad I wore the jacket. Yeah.
I don't know that it was Tallmadge who said this, but as we often say, this is the last free thing you'll get from the society. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Excellent. And now I'd like to make another presentation. Peter Hine, would you please come up? So as I mentioned, Peter is our immediate past president. He gave up his presidential insignia to me on December 4, and he's been naked ever since. And we're going to fix that because we now have his past president's star. Peter, thank you for all of your service, and it's continuing. I'm holding him to it.
Thank you, Peter.
So now to our main event. It is my pleasure to introduce Richard Brookhiser. He's speaking on his recent book, Glorious Lessons, John Trumbull, Painter of the American Revolution. And if you don't have a copy already, we do have some for sale, and take advantage of that. And if you're lucky, maybe he'll even sign it to you as well. Now, I'm not going to steal his thunder. I'm not going to tell you about the book, other than to note in advance that a lot of what Richard is going to talk to us about and is written about in this book is in our wheelhouse. And you will note that a number of events that Trumbull depicted or was involved in, because he lived through this period of time, have connections to Fraunces Tavern and to New York City. And that's great. One of them I will call out, and that is his painting of Battle at Bunker's Hill, June 17, 1775. We've got a reproduction of that in our gallery over there, where the permanent exhibit on the Birch trials that took place here at Fraunces Tavern is shown. Richard is, as most, if not all of you know, a celebrated journalist and author. And among his many books is a leading biography on George Washington and one on Alexander Hamilton. And to double down on both of them, he wrote and hosted Rediscovering George Washington and Rediscovering Alexander Hamilton, which are films by Michael Pack and aired on PBS. He also, for his day job, has been senior editor at National Review since 1970. Did I get that right, Richard? No, 79, but you started there in 1970.
First started.
Ah, that's great. And a well-deserved recipient of the National Humanities Medal. We're delighted that Richard, you and your wife, Jeannie Safer, were able to join us tonight. And I want to turn the floor over to you, Richard. Take it away.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you all for coming. Can everybody hear? Okay, good. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here at Fraunces Tavern. As Peter said, it will be mentioned again during the evening. If you saw the inauguration, either live or replay or pictures of it, you saw that the main podium, which is in the rotunda of the Capitol, they had to move it inside this year because of the cold. It was the first interior inauguration since 1984. But on either side of that main rotunda, there were two paintings by John Trumbull. He has four paintings in the rotunda. They are life-size images. The figures in them are life-size. And they come from his Revolutionary War series. There are five of them, half-life size, at the Wadsworth Athenaeum in Hartford, Connecticut. The entire 8 are at the Yale Art Gallery in New Haven. Trumbull left them to Yale College when he was an old man in return for an annuity, and there you can go see the whole series. When he was an old man, he said, if you think it's easy to paint a picture, go to that wall and make it tell a story. He painted many pictures during his life, told many stories, but the one that compelled him for most of his adulthood was the idea of doing a series that would tell the story of the Revolutionary War. It took him a long time, 45 years, a lot of time wasted painting other things, sometimes not painting anything at all, but he kept coming back to the story. And finally, in his old age, in the early 1830s, he finished it and left them to Yale. So tonight I'm going to talk about 4 of those 8 paintings. First, a little bit about the artist. He was born in 1756 in Lebanon, Connecticut, which is in the northeastern corner of the state. His father, Jonathan Trumbull, was the last colonial governor of Connecticut and the first post-independence governor of Connecticut. Trumbull was the youngest of 6 children, 4 boys, 2 girls. And since he was a boy, he wanted to draw and he wanted to paint. He wrote in his memoirs that over the mantle in the parlor of the family house, his 2 sisters would hang their artwork. Genteel young ladies then were taught to draw, they were taught to paint. If you're Jane Austen fans, you know that Emma Woodhouse paints. And you know that Elizabeth Bennet doesn't, which scandalizes Lady Catherine de Bourgh. But even in the colonies, genteel young ladies were taught to draw, taught to embroider. And so their works were hung over the mantle in the family parlor. And John remembered as a little boy lying on the floor and copying them on the floor, on what he called the nicely sanded floor. I guess it was not so nicely sanded once he'd finished his work, but his mother and sisters certainly indulged it. It seems like he was their pet. His father took a dimmer view because art was not a career for a responsible young man in 18th century Connecticut. The careers open were divinity or business or the law. Jonathan Trumbull had been trained as a clergyman. He got pulled into the family business when an older brother died. But he continued, he read the Old Testament every year in Hebrew, so he still had his training. And he wanted his youngest son to be a lawyer. This was an argument they had all throughout John's youth and early adulthood. The last discussion he recorded in his memoirs, and his father was telling him for, yet another time, you ought to be a lawyer. And John said, well, no, because lawyers deal with the vices of mankind. That's what the law is. I want, as artists do, to show the glories of my country, as artists did in ancient Athens. And his father said, that's a very good argument. Shows you'd be a good lawyer. But I think you've left something out. Well, what's that, sir? Said John. The answer was, Connecticut is not Athens. I love that answer. I think that could be a Cole Porter song, or maybe an entire novel by Henry James. Connecticut is not Athens. And indeed it wasn't. And his father sent him to Harvard, where his father himself had gone. He entered as a third-year student because his skills in Latin and Greek were so excellent. But while he was in Cambridge, he would cross the river to go to Boston, where he met John Singleton Copley, who was half a generation older and already an artist with a transatlantic reputation, one of the first fine painters in the colonies. And these were the first real paintings that John had ever seen. His sister's work was nice, but this was the real thing. These were real people in real spaces with real lighting, and it put you in the canvases with them. And he was just stunned and impressed when he first saw them. Then he graduated back to Lebanon. He taught school for a while, but the crisis of the imperial system was about to happen. The battles of Lexington and Concord happened in April 1775, and all England reacts like a hive that's been kicked. The New England colonies send their militias to besiege the British in Boston. John goes as an adjutant with a Connecticut regiment, and he's there in Boston for his 19th birthday. That was June 6th. He's stationed in Roxbury, which is now part of Boston, but then it was an independent town south of the city. And then 11 days after his birthday, he hears this outbreak of musket fire, artillery fire. It's across the city to the north, 4 miles away. There's smoke coming from over there. And what's going on is this. This represents the third and final charge of the British up Bunker Hill. Now, Boston is, there's water there, and then you can dimly see land there. That's the city of Boston. John would be back here in Roxbury. The British are coming up. These are the Americans, the defenders. The smoke in the air is from the town of Charlestown down here, actually on the harbor. It's just been incinerated by shells from British ships, which are in the water, not visible, but they would be behind and around. Now, this was the third British charge. The first two charges had been unsuccessful because they had no artillery cover. The British artillery was all on their ships, and the muzzles could not be elevated enough to cover men charging uphill. So the first two charges were more than decimated by the Americans on the top. But by the third charge, the Americans have begun to run out of ammunition, and now the British are ready to pay back all the killing and suffering that they've been experiencing this afternoon. We can identify many of the people in this painting. It was done 10 years after the battle in London, where John was studying art. So he got a number of the British officers to pose for him. General Sir William Howe here refused to. He's in the black hat. So his face was painted on the canvas by Benjamin West. who was John's teacher of painting, an American expat who had moved to London years ago and was George III's history painter. And you can see that Howe's face, his complexion is somewhat darker than all the other white faces in this painting, and that's West's palette. He just did faces darker than Trumbull did. So that's the reason for that. Who is dying here? This is Major John Pitcairn. He's in the arms of his son, Lieutenant, holding him up. But most of the dying people here are Americans. This man in the blue holding his musket up is Andrew McClary, Major Andrew McClary. He will be killed at the end of this charge. This man here leaning over is Lieutenant Colonel Moses Parker. He's mortally wounded. He will die in British captivity. The painting is named after this man here, Dr. Joseph Warren. It's called The Death of General Warren at Bunkers Hill. Warren was a patriot physician in Boston. He had treated the first American martyr in anti-British riots, even before the Boston Massacre. There was a young patriot who was killed in a disturbance, and Warren treated him, and he would give orations on the anniversary of the Boston Massacre. He was given the rank of Major General before this battle, but he chose to fight in the ranks. And in the third charge, he was hit with a bullet in the head and killed instantly. And here he lies. These men are protecting him from the thrust of this British grenadier. Two interesting figures you can dimly see here. There's a man in a hat, very hard to see in the background. This is Peter Salem, who's one of the black soldiers who fought during this engagement. And he's often credited with killing Major Pitcairn. There were other people who claimed to have done that. He's one of them. And he's certainly here, he's firing in Pitcairn's direction. Here in the corner, these two men, they are from Pomfret, Connecticut, which is also in the northeast corner of the state. This is Lieutenant Thomas Grosvenor. He's been wounded in the hand. This bullet was a magic bullet. It went through the stock of his rifle and then out and then into his hand. Behind him is his slave, Asaba. Now, a census in 1790 will show Asaba as a free man. In this engagement, apparently, he was not yet free, but they've both been fighting. Their clothes are disarrayed. They've been in action. And it's interesting in later reproductions of this Currier and Ives prints. Sometimes you'll see Asaba hidden behind Lieutenant Grosvenor. Sometimes his complexion is lightened. I think maybe the image of a black man wielding a gun in defense of freedom was problematic early in the 19th century. Some abolitionists did a book called Colored Heroes of the Revolution, and they got rid of Lieutenant Grosvenor and just had Asaba by himself. Now, people who saw this painting at the time, or history buffs today, know that the British victory at Bunkers Hill was Pyrrhic. Their casualties were twice as great as the American casualties. Nathaniel Greene said, look, if we can sell hills at this price, I'll let them take any number of hills at that casualty rate. That's not what this painting shows. This painting shows irresistible force and movable object. And the movable object is us. We are being defeated. We are being crushed and overwhelmed by the enemy. Trumbull chooses to begin his series with this image, obviously because he was only 4 miles away and he heard the gunfire. He was close to being there. But he also wants to show that revolution is hard. It's not easy. It's not all victories. And we start here with a defeat. The second painting in his series, which I'm not going to show you, is also a defeat. It's the death of General Richard Montgomery at Quebec. That was a gallant attack on Quebec, New Year's Eve, 1775. It's the moment when General Montgomery and his staff are killed by a blast of grape from a cannon that we cannot see. It's a surreal canvas. It's a night piece. The American army is coming out of the dark, and the deadly stroke comes from an unseen source. But for Trumbull's third canvas, he was given an idea by a new friend. This was Thomas Jefferson, who was the American minister to Paris in the late 1780s. He met Trumbull in London on a side trip to London. And Jefferson was always looking for bright young men, always looking for proteges. James Madison, undoubtedly the most famous, James Monroe also. But Jefferson also picked up Trumbull. Here was a young patriot, politically well-connected, but also an artist. And Jefferson had an artist streak himself, so they made a natural bond. And Jefferson said, look, you're here in London, you're learning how to paint from Benjamin West, you're seeing great paintings, but they're even more in Paris. You have to come to Paris and see those, learn from those. Live with me. You know, you live room and board for free, and then you can soak up the art world in Paris. And the result of this was Trumbull's third painting, this one. Now, Jefferson's personal motive for suggesting this subject is obviously that he's the hero of it. There he is, tallest man in the room, also the reddest, red waistcoat popping out, reddish hair. And this, of course, is the presentation of the Declaration of Independence to Congress. John Hancock is the president of Congress sitting here. These men are the drafting committee. This is John Adams. He's in the exact center of the painting. Roger Sherman behind him, Robert Livingston of New York there. And then here's Benjamin Franklin. He's the only figure in the painting who's looking at us. He's the only one whose eyes are going out of the painting to us. He's seen a lot already. He's 70 years old. He has a lot more to see. Then on either side are the other members of Congress spread out. Now, this is not an actual moment. None of these men were all in the room together at one point. Trumbull writes in his description of this painting for the Yale College Art Gallery that he knows that when a committee presents its work to a meeting, the usual form is that the chairman of the committee rises from his seat in the body of the meeting and reads whatever it is he has to read. But he brings the five of them forward so we can see them all better. And he also has people here. It's not the moment of signing either, because Robert Livingston never does sign it. He goes back to New York before the signing begins. And some of the signers have not yet arrived when the declaration is actually finished and voted on by Congress. So we can't see these history paintings, even when they depict moments or episodes, as like photographs. We cannot read our expectations of photographs back onto pre-photographic history painting. This is a particular episode, but Trumbull is also giving context and explanation. He wants to show all the people in Congress, and he wants to show the context of what they've done. Now, we can't see any of the words on Jefferson's pieces of paper there, but we can tell something about the country they want to found from the way Trumbull has presented them. One thing is that all these men are in civilian clothes. Nobody's in uniform. There is a war going on. These are captured British flags and drums hang there as trophies. And George Washington had worn his uniform to the Second Continental Congress, his French and Indian War uniform, to show, look, it's going to come to the point of fighting, and if it does, I'm ready. But he's already gone. He has been sent to join the army outside Boston. Now the British having left Boston, he's with the army in New York. So all these people are in civilian clothes. This is not a coup d'etat. This is not a military revolution or an uprising of generals. These are civilians. These are civilian politicians who've been elected by their fellow citizens to come here and run this revolution. The other thing you notice about them is that they're all peers, at least judging by their dress. They are all dressed like wealthy or prosperous men. Some of these men are very wealthy. This is Robert Morris, the merchant prince of Philadelphia, possibly the wealthiest man in America at this moment. Behind him is the other contender, Charles Carroll of Maryland. When he signed the Declaration, somebody said, there go a few millions. It didn't work out that way. He was never captured. Four of the signers were, 3 from South Carolina, 1 from New Jersey. The New Jersey man, Richard Stockton, was very badly treated, probably shortened his life. So these are 2 wealthy men, but here is Josiah Bartlett, New Hampshire. He's a farmer and a doctor. So, and they're all dressed approximately the same way. I'm sure Robert Morris's fabrics are better than Josiah Bartlett's, but they have the same sort of clothing. Nobody is wearing a diadem or a coronet. Nobody's wearing an ermine. Nobody's wearing a chain of rank. There is no nobility here. These men are all citizens. They're all peers. This tells us something else about this country. The other thing is that they have deliberated. One of the artists Trumbull would meet in Paris is Jacques-Louis David. He saw the Oath of the Horatii when it was being painted. And of course, those noble Romans are saluting to show their dedication to Rome. And he would repeat that gesture when he painted drew his sketch of the Third Estate, swearing to become the French National Assembly at the beginning of that revolution. And that's an active, dynamic gesture. That's what Elon Musk did, and was thought to be a Nazi salute. But that's what the Frenchmen are doing in David's work. These men are not. They've had a discussion. They've hashed this out. They've argued their arguments, and now it's done. And now they're going to do what they said they would do, sign the document. Okay, here we go. Trumbull, after this, he painted 2 more battles, victories this time, the capture of the Hessians at Trenton and the death of General Mercer at Princeton. Then he painted a surrender, the surrender of General Burgoyne at Saratoga. And he painted a second surrender, which is this one. This, of course, is Yorktown, the final major battle of the Revolution, October 1781. And again, we're being shown a lot of people in a way that will give you a context. This painting is a depiction of the geopolitics of the American Revolution. The losers surrendering here in the middle, these are the British. The Americans are here, here, and here. And our French allies are here. The Yorktown operation was almost a miraculous success. The complexity of it was astounding. It was one French army marching from Rhode Island, an American army joining them in upstate New York, a French fleet coming up from the West Indies, joining a smaller French fleet, also from Rhode Island, and then joining American troops that were already in Virginia, boxing Lord Cornwallis into Yorktown on one of the rivers that empties into Chesapeake Bay. Cornwallis was there because he was hoping for reinforcement. He had been maneuvered out of the Carolinas by Nathaniel Greene, and he was hoping to get help from New York. What came instead was this joint Anglo-French operation. We have here, this is General Rochambeau, the French commander. The 2 admirals, de Grasse and Barras, are there. Washington is here. If you look closely at it, he's almost smiling. Almost. I mean, he does, that's a rare thing, but I think he's entitled to do that now. Here's Alexander Hamilton standing just to the right side of that horse. And then here, second from the end, is Lafayette. And next to him is Baron von Steuben, both foreigners, French and Prussian, but they are in the Continental Army. Many of these Frenchmen were here fighting under orders of the French government or for reasons of realpolitik. Lafayette and von Steuben were fighting for a cause. They fought as Americans. Lafayette would be buried in earth taken from Bunkers Hill back in France. And Steuben would move to Utica, New York. That's where he would die and where he would be buried. Now, this is not Lord Cornwallis surrendering. This is his number 2, General O'Hara. The story of this goes back to the siege of Charleston, which had happened earlier in the fighting in the South. Lord Cornwallis had captured Charleston, but he denied the honors of war to the American defender, who was General Benjamin Lincoln here. The honors of war meant that if you lost, you could march out with your flags flying and your arms shouldered. But Cornwallis did not let Lincoln do that. Whoops. So Cornwallis is not permitted to do that now. He's complaining, he's back here in this house where he's been during the whole siege. He's complaining he's sick, so he sent his second in command. General O'Hara offered his sword to General Rochambeau. Britain will surrender to France, 2 superpowers peers. The Rochambeau said, no, you have to surrender to General Washington. This is even though there are more French soldiers here than American, but this is Washington's war. So you have to give your sword to him. Washington is not going to take a sword from a number 2. So he says, no, you have to give it to General Lincoln. Karma catches up with the British. What's nice about this painting, I think, is the lightheartedness. Yeah, there are clouds, but the sun there's light here. I love the flags. This flag is just great. It's got extra stripes in it. It seems so exuberant. So if Trumbull's series was all about warfare, this is where it would end. But it doesn't. There's an 8th painting, which is this one. This is George Washington returning his commission to Congress in December of 1783. Yorktown was October of 81. It takes a long time to negotiate the Treaty of Paris. That's finished in the summer. And then Washington, he comes to New York. The British evacuate New York. As you all know, he bids farewell to his officers in this building. And then he asks Congress, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to wrap this up? And Congress then is seated in Annapolis. They were driven out of Philadelphia by a near riot of unpaid junior officers. And then they went, I believe Princeton was the next place they went, but then they arrived in Annapolis. This is the State House of Annapolis, still there. And so they were in session there in Maryland, and they said to Washington, will you come to us and you present your commission to us here? This is the presiding officer of Congress, Thomas Mifflin. Here's Thomas Jefferson, who was there. He's a member of Congress. He's got some extra light on him, so we don't miss him. This is James Madison, who was a member of Congress. He was not here in the room. He was home at Montpelier, but Trumbull wanted him here so he would have all the Revolutionary era presidents depicted in his paintings. And this, of course, is General Washington. Now, the 2 things to notice about this, one is the presence of women and girls. This is the first time in the series we see that. Naturally enough, a lot of these scenes are military. And you had women like Molly Pitcher, women of the army who occasionally took fighting roles. And there are always, women who disguise themselves as men so they can fight. There's a ballad, Jackaroo, if any of you know it, about a woman who follows her lover into war dressed as a man. But these are civilian women. Here's Martha Washington up here. Next to her is Harriet Wadsworth, who was Trumbull's fiancée at one point, died of tuberculosis. Excuse me, Eleanor Custis is next to Martha. That's her granddaughter. Harriet is next to Eleanor Custis. These two girls are the daughters of Charles Carroll, again, the Maryland magnate and congressman. He's got his arm around one of them. Their names are Mary and Betsy, 5 and 13. And the reason they're here is to show what this was all about. If a revolution doesn't end in peace and freedom and normal life, then it was just murder and robbery. It was just a sick man turning over in bed. But you want to end it like this. You want to end it with this. The other thing that's different about this painting, certainly different from the Declaration of Independence, is we have uniforms. This is Congress. They're all in civilian clothes, but here's the military. Washington and other officers of his. So civilians on the left, uniforms on the right. With just a little tweaking, historical and artistic. This could be Cromwell dismissing Parliament. This could be Napoleon and his brother telling the Directory, you're going home. This could be the moment when the fighting men say, all right, we've been fighting and dying while you've been talking. Now we're going to run things. We've actually made all the effort, and now we're going to take all the power. But not this general, not here. See, behind him is a chair. And chairs in paintings of this period can be thrones. This chair is empty. He's not going to sit in it. On the chair is a cloak, reddish purple cloak. And cloaks, especially of that color, signify royalty or imperial status. He's not wearing this cloak. It's December. He's going to have to wear something when he goes home to Mount Vernon, but not this, not for that purpose. He's coming here because the power he has, the commission he has, was not his. And he always knew that. It was theirs. It was Congress's to give. They gave it to him for a time and for a job. And he's done his job and his time is up. And now it's time for him to go home, which he will do, and go back to private life. And this is how Trumbull saw the revolution ending. And he's telling us this is also how revolutions should end. This is one of the last paintings he did. He did the larger version that's in the Capitol Rotunda first, and then he did the smaller version, which is at Yale. He preferred to work small. All the Yale paintings are 2 feet tall, 3 feet long. That was his preferred size. He doesn't want you standing back. He wants to draw you in to look at it and get close to it. And he also stipulated to Yale that he be buried beneath these paintings. So the Yale Art Gallery has moved twice since he built it and hung his paintings there. And each time he and his wife are respectfully disinterred and reburied. So if you go to Yale now, on the first floor, there is a tablet in the floor saying that here, beneath here, and the floor below is where Colonel Trumbull lies. He gave to the revolution his sword and his pencil. So thank you very much. Yes, we're going to take Q&A.
Please,
Yes, okay.
take it away.
We have a microphone
I do.
here.
I have a microphone here. We'll take just a few questions before we move on to the book signing and for some of us, the dinner. So in the room here today, questions.
You spoke a little bit about how Trumbull had some of the British officers who were at the Battle of Bunker Hill pose. Could you expand on how he did his research to develop the scenes that he depicted in his paintings?
Well, he at different times he would print lists of what he was going to paint. Part of this is salesmanship. If you're a painter in the late 18th century, how do you live? How do you make money? Well, hopefully you get commissions for individual works or you sell those works. But the other way to do it is to sell prints. And sometimes you can make a lot more money on the print than you can on the original canvas. So to prime the public for these subscriptions of prints, Trumbull at different times said, I'm doing this series of paintings of the Revolution, and here are the images that you're going to see. I've already done Bunker Hill in Quebec. Those were his first two, but look what else is coming. And he didn't finish all of them. There were some that he said he would do that he never did. He was going to do the Treaty of Paris, didn't do that. He was going to do the Battle of Eutaw Springs, one of Nathaniel Greene's battles. This is part of our forgetfulness of the South. I mean, we kind of think the Revolution went down to Virginia, and yeah, we know there was stuff in the South, but we don't pay quite enough attention to it. And I'm afraid Trumbull's omission is part of that omission from our own minds. But so he had in mind scenes he wanted to paint, and then he was very careful to collect portraits. When he was in Paris, staying with Jefferson, that's when he got the French officers. That's also obviously when he gets Jefferson. One thing he does with the Jefferson painting is he gives it to Maria Cosway, who he introduced to Thomas Jefferson. So Trumbull was Jefferson's wingman during that whole affair of the heart that Jefferson had with the married Mrs. Cosway. But then he goes back after his years in Europe studying painting. 1789, he comes back to the United States, and he goes up and down the East Coast collecting images. He goes up to New Hampshire, he goes down to South Carolina. If someone has died, Nathaniel Greene died, pretty early. He was given an estate in Georgia by the state, and then he died of sunstroke there. Trumbull would either copy an existing painting of this person or he'd paint the person's son. That's how he gets General Mercer, who was killed at the Battle of Princeton. He painted Mercer's son. So, and also at Yale, in addition to these 8 paintings of the series, they have these little images about 3 or 4 inches tall. They're not quite miniatures. Miniatures were painted to be worn on brooches. These are like Trumbull's notes to himself. They're little paintings on mahogany. And these are people he will put into the canvases. Some people didn't make it. Some are just there. They seem to be there because they interested him. There's one man, Lemuel Hopkins, who has these bulging bug eyes. And he was a friend of Trumbull's, but I kind of think he painted him because I never saw eyes like that. Let me paint them. So he took very seriously trying to get the images of people, even though, as I said before, this is not like photography. He is not going to tell you this is exactly what happened at this moment. Here is the episode, here's the period, here's an event, a larger event. I'm going to show you this from points of view that you couldn't have had if you'd actually been there. Look at Bunker Hill again. I mean, no one who was actually there could have processed all this. No, it's impossible, but fine, that's all right. I want to give you a panorama. Here comes the enemy, here go us, here's poor General Warren. So I think that's how he did his work. There's a question there.
Was the series of 8 commissioned, and how much did did he make?
Well, yes, this is the other question. How does he support himself? His he begins it just to promote the series and to promote himself. The first two that he did them in London. Bunker Hill, when Bunker Hill was almost finished, his teacher, Benjamin West, very generously threw a dinner for artistic London. And he put Bunker Hill on an easel in a prominent place in the room. And Sir Joshua Reynolds came a little late. He was the greatest painter in England of the day. West would not have agreed, but Reynolds was better. And Reynolds, he saw this painting, went right up to it and he said, West, this coloring is better than you usually do. What is this? And West said, oh, well, it's not mine. It's Mr. Trumbull's here. May I introduce you? Now, the backstory of that is that Reynolds and Trumbull had already met. When Trumbull was early in his days in London, he takes a painting to Reynolds to show him. And it's a kind of a sweet painting of a father and a son. But there's some problems with the anatomy and other details. And Reynolds looked at it and he looked at the coat on the father and he said, oh, that coat is very bad, sir. It's not cloth, it's tin. And Trumbull said, well, I knew there were problems with the painting, but I hoped you'd tell me how to make it better. So he took it away. So this is his moment of revenge when West says, oh no, here's Mr. Trumbull, let me introduce you. Okay, so he did those, but how do you go on? Well, one thing, he wanted prints. He found an engraver. It took him a long time. Found a man in Stuttgart who was a top flight engraver. He was told, don't look for one in England because, engraving, our great defeat here is probably not going to tempt English engravers. So he found a German to do it. Very good. But, that took 3 years. And then by 3 years, the French Revolution has happened. People have gone on to other stuff. So the sales he was hoping in Europe, weren't there. And then he hoped, well, maybe America, Washington is president now, we're all back together. But then the two-party system begins, and all these heroes of the revolution start fighting each other. So that's another, kind of blow. And this is when he starts, losing his focus and doing other things. Then he paints portraits. I mean, that was the fallback for a painter. You could paint portraits. That's how you made your money. And Trumbull had a very ambivalent attitude. He was very careful to get the faces for his series, but to be paid to paint Mr. Merchant and Mrs. Merchant, and a lot of them are cranked out. Some of them he gets interested. He gets engaged in a face and he makes a really nice portrait. And then his big break, the War of 1812, the British burn the White House and the Capitol, so the Capitol has to be rebuilt. And Trumbull sees, okay, here's my chance. And he really lobbies hard to get a commission to put paintings in a new rotunda. And he works with the architect. He wants it just so. He wants a space that's grand but simple. He wants an easel. He wants a big circular easel. And he writes John Adams, can you help me out? Adams wrote a kind of crotchety Adams-like letter back. He writes Jefferson. And he and Jefferson have quarreled. I won't get into that story. It's interesting. But Jefferson really comes through and he says, sir, you say you need my patronage. You do not. Your skill is patronage enough. But he writes letters. Very Jefferson at his personal best. So Trumbull gets a commission, $32,000 to do 4 paintings. That's pretty good, in 1817. That's when Congress votes it. And he picks the subjects with President Madison. Madison suggested Bunker Hill. Trumbull said, no, I want to do the 2 surrenders. Kind of unfortunate. I think Bunker Hill is the best of these 8 images, but that's what Trumbull wanted to show. And then he wanted to do the other 4 in the rotunda. But, people said, Andrew Jackson supporters said, no, let's have the Battle of New Orleans in here. And then John Quincy Adams supporters said, no, let's do, this, and that, and the other thing. And then what we ended up with are the 4 colonial subjects. It's Columbus, DeSoto, Pocahontas, and the Pilgrims. Trumbull wanted to do all 8. He only got the 4. So where he finally gets his wall and tells his story is Yale. And he worked that through a nephew by marriage who was on the faculty of Yale. And he said, look, if Yale gives me an annuity, I will leave all these paintings and build a gallery for them. And so Yale came through, and that's why they got them, even though there was no Trumbull family. They all went to Harvard, but Yale gets the paintings. So anybody else?
So let's just do one more, because I know we do have some books still to be signed. Final question.
Hi, this is great topic. The painting here, so one of the controversies of the Bunker Hill flag, which is up in the top, is it blue or is it red? Trumbull paints it both ways in 2 different paintings, right?
Oh, the Wadsworth Athenaeum, does he do it blue there?
He does it blue there.
Yeah.
So
okay.
do you have any insight on that?
No, I didn't pay much attention to the Wadsworth Athenaeum ones because those were late in his life, and his, as he went on, his skills diminished. I mean, you can see the pizzazz is not here. What he still has is narrative and composition. But, you compare that with this. I mean, there's just Reynolds was right. There's a real sparkle here, and in some of the early ones, and even as late as Yorktown, which he began very early on in this process. I mean, it's kind of a sedate arrangement, but wait a second. The flag, the faces, the portraits. I mean, there's good stuff in this painting. So, he did other things in the Wadsworth Athenaeum. He corrected the room here. Jefferson gave him a floor plan and said, there were 2 doors back here. Well, there weren't. There was one there. So in the Wadsworth Athenaeum version, you've got 1 door here. So he made some fixes, but no, but I just like my Yale painting. So that's what I focused on. Okay,
Great.
are we
Thank
done?
you so
Okay,
much.
thank you.